Now that we have an environment set up, we can start making projects. What we'll do first is we'll create a place to host all of our projects. And a good practice, we'll go to the Documents folder. And in here, we'll just create a new folder and we'll name it Java-projects, all lowercase. One thing to keep in mind as you get more into programming is to avoid spaces when you name things. And we're going to do everything all lowercase here. That's because Windows is not case sensitive, so it treats a capital J the same as a lowercase j when you're naming files and folders. But other operating systems that are Unix based, like Mac OS and Linux, don't do this. They're case sensitive. So just to make everything easier on ourselves, we'll just do all lowercase and no spaces. Inside the Java projects folder, we'll create a new folder for our first project, and we'll name this one Exploration. We'll just go with one word to make it simple, and Exploration because we're just going to be exploring how Java projects work. So we're in the Exploration folder, and up here in the bar, we're going to type the letters CMD to open a command prompt. So this means we are in that folder. So I'm in my Documents, Java Projects, Exploration folder. To turn an empty folder into a Gradle project, all we have to do is type Gradle init. And since we told Windows where Gradle lives, it's going to boot up Gradle and it's going to start asking us some questions. We're going to do an application, so we're going to type the number 2 here, corresponding to application. For everything else, we should be able to take the defaults. So it says our implementation language. You can use Gradle to write programs in several different languages out of the box. We want Java, and it says that Java is the default. So we can either type the number 3 or we can just press enter. We don't want to split the functionality up into multiple projects, and that's the default. So we'll just press enter again. The build script has a language of its own, either Groovy or Kotlin, and we're not going to be messing with this, so Groovy is okay to accept as the default. A testing framework, once we get into testing, we'll probably stick with JUnit 4, which is the default here, so we can keep going with enter. And project name, Exploration is a good name for the project, so we'll press enter and accept that. The source package, which we'll talk about in a minute what that means, is also Exploration. We can accept that. And we get build successful here, meaning that everything worked out. So we can close this window, and here we have a whole bunch of files. I'm going to close this and just open Visual Studio Code now. So we've now created a project, but we want to open it up. Now, Visual Studio Code will let you open whole projects. So we're going to open a folder. And I've got this window pop up here. It's not a big deal, so we're just going to ignore it. You might have it, you might not. It doesn't matter. We want to open a folder, and we can navigate to a folder this way. We can also go to File, Open Folder, and get the same option. Or we can press Control-K-O, and that will let us open a folder as well. So whichever way you want to open a folder is up to you. So we'll just click this Open Folder button here. We're going to navigate Documents, Java Projects, Exploration. So see, I have Exploration selected in the folder here, and I'm just going to click Select Folder. This is going to open the entire folder in Visual Studio Code. And we have this pop up over here. So we see that down here I saw activating extensions. It might take a minute to get everything booted up. So we'll wait just a second for that as we look around. Now here we see some icons, and we can see the anatomy of a project. I'm going to close this tab here because we don't really need it. In Exploration, there's a folder here called .gradle, and this is really just a bunch of setup files for running a Gradle project. We don't need to worry about what's in this folder. It's not going to affect us. There's this regular Gradle folder. So notice there's a .gradle and then a Gradle folder. Again, same deal. It's not going to affect us. There's the Gradle wrapper in here, Gradle wrapper's properties. things that we're not going to mess with. So we shouldn't be looking in the Gradle folder or in the .gradle folder. There's a few other things you'll find here. There's .getAttributes and .getIgnore. Right now, we're not dealing with Git, which is a source control tool, which maybe we'll talk more about later, but for right now, you're not going to mess with these files. We also have Gradle, Gradle.bat, and settings.gradle. These three files are also something we are not going to mess with. And these are all automatically generated. So far, the only thing I've talked about, really that I haven't talked about, is the app folder. The app folder is the only place that we're going to work, and it's where all of our code is going to live. So I'm going to expand it. There's two things in here. There's src, and when you see src, you read it as source. Yeah, it is your source code. There's this build.gradle file here, which again is something we're not going to mess with. Then in source, there's two directories. There's main and test. When you write software, you can also write additional code that will run tests for you. That's what the test directory is for. Hopefully we'll look into testing more as we get familiar with Java, but for right now, we're not going to mess with it. So we're going to go to main, and there's two folders in here. Main has Java and resources. Resources is empty. This is where you would put things that aren't code that you would still want to use. One good example is icons or translations. Things like that could live in the resources folder. Inside Java, we have this exploration folder, and then we have app.java. So any file that ends in .java is a code file. It is somewhere where our software is going to live. Now, this app source main Java, all of your code is going to live in here, and then there's this folder here called exploration. That is the name of our project. Everything we do, everything we make needs to be inside this exploration folder. So we don't need to make other folders inside of Java. We need to make everything inside of exploration because that is our project. And exploration has a special meaning. It is a package. In Java, everything is organized in packages. And a package, more or less, can be thought of as a folder. So the exploration package is the exploration folder. And exploration is the first folder inside of Java. So exploration is our root package or our top package or our project package. If I right click on exploration here and I say I want to create a new folder and just call it my folder, just like that. And then if I want to create a new file inside of my folder called testfile.java. Okay, I have a class inside of my folder inside of exploration. I can delete that, no problem. Just move it to recycle bin, and it's like it was never there. One more thing to consider. So let's see what this does here. I can say new class, so nothing there. And so this is just kind of me playing around with Visual Studio Code as well. I'm going to go back to exploration, create new, let's see, we have new file, new folder, create Maven project. Again, Maven, remember, is one of those other build tools we can use. So I'm going to create a new folder again in here. I'm just going to call this outer, just give it a name. And inside of outer, I'm going to go back, I'm going to add a new file, and I'm going to call this outerclass.java. Okay, and so now Java's had some time to start up, so it's realizing some things. The package for this class is called exploration.outer. Now, the app file was named for package exploration, but this is in package exploration.outer. That's because this file lives in the folder outer, which lives in the folder exploration. So the whole package for this file is called exploration.outer. And this is why it's very important to be careful with how you name things. I didn't use any spaces because that will cause problems with your package names. And I only used lowercase letters. If I rename this later, for some reason, to be capital outer, right? Java wants to make some refactoring changes, so I'm going to let it do that. Now notice it changed the package here to be a capital O. Java needs things to be named very, very, very specifically. I'm going to leave everything I can as lowercase for the package names just to make things easier on Java. Now I get these two lines. I'm going to delete that line. Now I can add a new folder inside of outer that I'll call inner. And I will add a new file inside of inner called innerclass.java. And now notice this is in the package exploration.outer.inner because it is in the inner folder, which is in the outer folder, which is in the exploration folder. So notice Java exploration is where our package starts. So Java is not in the name here, but exploration is. So I'm going to leave these files alone for now that I created. I'm just going to look at this app.java file. But just be aware that anytime you add a folder, that adds to the packages. Every file you create is going to belong to a package. The innerclass.java file belongs to the exploration.outer.inner package because it is in the exploration outer inner folder. The outer class belongs to the exploration.outer package because it is in the exploration outer folder. And one thing you can notice in Visual Studio Code, you get these breadcrumbs. So here at the top, we can see the whole path into my file. So I'm in the inner class file, which is in the inner folder, which is in the outer folder, which is in the exploration folder. So if you have a hard time reading this hierarchy here, which I sometimes do because I'm not a huge fan of this automatic setting to where the folders get collapsed like this, which you can change, but we won't worry about it right now. You can trace it in these breadcrumbs. Same here for the outer class. Outer class is in outer, which is in exploration, which matches the package. So the app file, which is in the exploration folder, and then we're in Java, means we're in the exploration package. So every file is going to belong to a package, and you always generate the name of a package based on the structure of folders to get there, starting with the folder inside the Java folder, which for us is exploration. So that's interesting. One thing to keep in mind now is we're looking at a file here, app.java. Remember, any file that ends in .java is code. Every file holds what's called a class in Java, and classes are something very central to object-oriented programming. This innerclass.java has a class named innerclass. This outerclass.java file has a class named outerclass. There are a few things in Java like classes. There's a class, there's an interface, there's an enum. These are all treated about the same as classes. And we'll talk more about what a class actually is and how it works and what it does. But for right now, just get used to the idea that anything in a Java file is a class or something equivalent to a class. And again, we're going to learn more about what a class is later, but that's kind of the what is a file, what does it hold? So the app file named capital A lowercase pp holds a class named app capital A lowercase pp. And you'll notice the same for innerclass.java and outerclass.java. The name of the file needs to be exactly what the name of the class is, or the interface, or the enum is, without the .java at the end. So just like the package name is very specifically tied to the folder names, the file name is very specifically tied to the class name. And if you get something spelled wrong, you're going to get errors in your code, and it'll pop up as red squiggles in the class name or in the package name. So be very careful when naming things. That's a very easy problem to run into, especially for new developers. but it is something that can still pop up even as you get later in your career. So there's a lot of things that get generated here, and let's just run this code to see what happens. So the easiest way to run code is to go over here and press this triangle. It says run. So we're just going to press go. We're going to run Java, and it's going to compile our code. It's going to do all this work for us, and the first time you run this, you might get some stuff like this pop up. We're just going to check it and let it have total access, let it run everything it needs to run. It's not going to be a big deal for what we're doing, but we do need it to work. Okay, so that worked, and we see this hello world here. That means it ran. So I'm going to close this by trashing it. So you have a couple options. You can press the play button. And again, I shouldn't be getting that pop-up this time. So we'll run Java, compiling, and then we get some output here, hello world. Another option to run is we can press this run right here, and it will do the same thing for us. We have a few other options here. So in this command prompt here for PowerShell, you can see PS is PowerShell. I can try typing Gradle Build. And as we see that happen, we see some stuff happening here, configuring, executing. Takes a few seconds. And the first time you run this, it'll probably take a pretty decent chunk of time, but as you run it again and again, it takes less time. Gradle Build is a command that turns your Java code into computer code, or rather Java byte code, that the Java virtual machine can understand. So we talked earlier about the Java runtime environment needing to be on your computer in order to execute or run Java applications. The way Java works is there's this thing called the JVM, the Java virtual machine, and you can install a JVM on pretty much any computer. It runs in a lot of places. And what's nice about that is when you build Java code, normally, so with a language like C++, when you compile C++ code into machine code, you're doing it for a very specific computer, very specific CPU to be more exact. So if I'm on a Windows computer and I compile a C++ project, it's going to turn that into machine code that my Windows computer very specifically can understand, and that some other Windows computers probably also can understand. But it's going to have to be recompiled for other architectures, other CPUs. With Java, it's a little bit different. When you build a Java project, it's like compiling it, but instead of making it for my computer, it's turning my Java project into something that the Java virtual machine can understand. And the power of Java, like some other languages, is that because of this, when I write my Java code and build it, once I've done that one time, it will work on any other computer that has the Java virtual machine installed, at least a compatible version. And because the JDK 11 is a long-term support version, as long as that computer has a Java runtime environment, a JRE, a Java virtual machine installed for Java 11 or later, it can understand my code. If I wanted even older computers to work, I could use Java 8, which is another long-term support version. But the idea is that when I build my code, I am turning it from human-readable Java into what's called Java bytecode, which is something the Java virtual machine can understand. And if a computer has the Java virtual machine installed on it through a Java runtime environment, then it can execute that bytecode. And so that's what's happening when we build. So when we run Gradle Build, we're saying, turn my human-readable Java code into Java understandable Java bytecode. And when we do that, you look in here, there's this bin directory. You go to main, outer. You see this app.class file? You should never be messing with app.class files. But we can open it up and we see something that's not super human readable. That's because these class files are used by the Java virtual machine, and these are build artifacts. And so that's something to just keep in mind, that as you build your projects, these class files will pop up. Always make sure you're editing a Java file, not a class file. Class files are helpful sometimes, but it's not something that you'll ever need to delve into. So we've looked at kind of what is a package, what is a file, and there are going to be some keywords in here. There's this package line here, which tells you, hey, I belong to this package. There's this class line here that tells you what class I'm dealing with. And there's other code in here. The most important piece of code for what we're going to be working with right now is this guy named main. And main just tells you this is where my application starts. And there's other stuff happening in here, but just know that when you see this main, that means, hey, this is where my program begins executing. And you can actually figure out where main is going to be. And let's see if we can find out. It's not in the settings.gradle file. So let's look in the Gradle wrapper properties. Is it in here? Doesn't look like it's in here. So let's look in the build.gradle file, and I think it's in here. Yep. So right here, see how you have this word here, main class? That means what is the class that has the main method, is one way of thinking about it. So when I go here, I see, okay, the main class is exploration, so it's in the exploration package, and it's the app class. So here's the exploration package, and here's the app class. So this is the class that has the main method. And so when I actually run my Java code, so building and running are two different steps, but when you click run or when you click the play button, here you're actually building and running at the same time. I get this hello world because it's printing. See this word print? And you see this get greeting, which is the same as this get greeting. And here you see hello world. So there's a lot of stuff happening kind of in here that if you've never seen Java code before, if you've never seen any code before, can be confusing. But the key notes to be aware of are that when I ran the application, I saw the words hello world. And right here in the application, I also see those words hello world. So somehow, whatever's happening on line 8 is getting output to the console through something that's happening in the main method. And I'm using the word method here without explaining what a method is, but methods are something we'll talk about more when we learn about classes. But be aware that main is super important. It is where your application starts, and anything that you want to have happen from your application has to start in main. So even though the hello world text is up here in this other part of the program, somehow we get from main to that text, which we're going to learn more about how that works as we learn more about programming through Java. And there's a whole bunch of words in here that we're just kind of ignoring. We have the word public, the word string, the word void, the word static. We see this args here. We see this word new. We see system.out.print.ln. We haven't totally talked about what a class actually is yet, but this is just kind of all talking about the bones of a Java program. You'll see all these things in a Java program, and it's important to understand and to expect them. And we're going to talk more about kind of what they are and what they really mean as we learn more programming. But this video is kind of more about what am I going to find in a project, and how does a Java program get built, and how does a Java program get run. And so I'm going to just delete the semicolon here. Don't worry about why that's there or why that's not there. I'm going to click the play button just so you're aware. If you ever have a mistake in your code and it won't run for some reason, you won't see build successful. You'll get some text that tells you that there's something not quite right. And notice we did not get the hello world printout. So you will know if something's not right, but you may not know why it's not right. So this is kind of a big overview to what you're going to find in a Java project. For now, be aware that whenever we create a Java project, app is going to be the file we're going to be working in. And again, main needs to be there. And it needs to be here exactly like this for right now. But in the next video, we'll probably talk more about kind of what these words mean and do a little bit more with what can you do to get a program running. We'll talk more about what system.println does. And we'll talk more about kind of what a string is and what these words mean, like I said. But this is the bones and the structure of a Java project. Just remember that the only files that you're really going to be messing with are going to live in app, source, main, Java, and then inside of that, whatever you named your package, whatever you named your project. And that the only files we'll be editing end.java, that everything needs to be named exactly like the files and folders they belong to. So it's just a lot of, be careful, watch what you're doing, and be very specific with naming things. And we'll get some practice with that as we go through other lessons.